The $96 trillion reset has begun, and silver is at the center of it. Right now, while you're watching this, $96 trillion is quietly being repositioned inside the global financial system. Not transferred, not traded, reset. And almost no one understands what that actually means. The headlines will tell you this is about inflation cooling, about rates stabilizing, about markets adjusting. And that narrative is wrong, completely wrong. What's happening right now is not a cycle. It's not a correction. It's the early phase of a structural reset that only happens once every few generations. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. Every time a reset of this magnitude has happened in history, one thing has always been true. Paper wealth was sacrificed and physical reality won. Always. The number 96 trillion isn't a guess. It is the estimated value of financial assets, sitting inside systems that only function as long as trust holds. Government debt, derivatives, unfunded obligations, promises layered on top of promises. And resets don't happen because systems fail suddenly. They happen because the math stops working quietly first. When the math breaks, assets are repriced. Not evenly, not fairly, but selectively. And this is where silver enters the picture, not as a precious metal, not as an inflation hedge, but as something far more dangerous to the system, a physical bottleneck inside a paper world. Silver sits at the intersection of money, energy, and technology. It is required for power grids, solar panels, semiconductors, data centers, military systems, and now next-generation batteries. And unlike paper assets, silver cannot be printed, rehypothecated, or politically negotiated into existence. That makes it a problem. Because resets do not reward things that are easy to create. They reward things that are impossible to fake. Here's the mistake most people are making. They think a reset means collapse. It doesn't. Collapse is chaotic. A reset is controlled. It's managed. It's slow enough to avoid panic, but fast enough that most people don't reposition in time. And by the time the headlines admit what's happening, the repricing is already done. In this series, I'm going to show you why the $96 trillion reset is already underway, why silver is structurally embedded at the center of it, and why the price you see on your screen right now has almost nothing to do with its real role in the next system. This isn't about predictions. This is about patterns. To understand why this reset is happening now, you first need to understand what a reset actually is, because most people misunderstand it completely. A reset is not a crash. Crashes are accidents. Resets are responses. They happen when a system becomes so large, so leveraged, and so mathematically unstable that it can no longer be sustained without rewriting the rules. Governments don't announce resets. Central banks don't warn you. They let the old system decay while quietly constructing the framework for the next one. And resets always follow the same sequence. First comes expansion. Debt grows faster than productivity. Financial assets inflate faster than real output. This feels good. Everyone believes they're getting richer, even though nothing tangible is being created at the same pace. Then comes strain. Interest costs rise. Supply chains fracture. Governments begin issuing emergency programs. Temporary measures become permanent. The system starts consuming more energy just to stay upright. Then comes the critical phase. Loss of credibility. Not collapse, credibility. People don't lose faith all at once. Institutions do. Settlement delays increase. Inventories disappear. Paper claims stop behaving like physical reality. This is where we are now. You can see it in sovereign debt markets where buyers are demanding higher yields just to compensate for risk that didn't even exist before. You can see it in commodity markets where futures prices diverge from physical availability. You can see it in energy systems that require more raw material every year just to maintain output. And here's the key insight most people miss. Resets don't destroy wealth evenly, they reprice it. Paper assets that rely on confidence are diluted, restructured, or quietly devalued. Physical assets tied to necessity are elevated. Not because anyone chooses them, but because the system has no alternative. This is why resets always revolve around energy, infrastructure, and money. In ancient systems, that meant land and grain. In industrial systems, it meant oil and steel. In the modern system, it means electricity, data, and the materials that make both possible. Silver sits inside all three. It is embedded in electrical transmission. It is embedded in energy generation. It is embedded in advanced computing and defense systems. And unlike oil or copper, silver has one fatal characteristic from a policy perspective. It is consumed, not recycled efficiently. Once silver is dispersed into electronics, solar panels, missiles, and data centers, it is functionally gone for decades. That makes every ounce more valuable in a reset environment, not less. This is why silver behaves differently during resets. It doesn't move early, it doesn't move smoothly, it stays suppressed until suddenly it becomes essential. And when a reset reaches that stage, price stops being the driver, allocation does. The reason silver is always underestimated going into a reset is simple. It never announces itself as critical. It becomes critical quietly, layer by layer, system by system, until removing it would cause everything else to fail. This didn't happen overnight. For most of the 20th century, silver was treated as a leftover monetary metal. Gold held prestige. Oil held power. Silver was viewed as secondary, useful but replaceable. That assumption no longer holds. And the shift happened without a headline moment. Start with electricity. Silver is the most electrically conductive element on Earth. Not one of the best. The best. That matters when systems scale, when power grids expand, when transmission losses compound, when efficiency becomes the difference between stability and blackout. Silver isn't optional. It's engineered in. Then came electronics. Every device that processes data at high speed relies on silver at the contact level. Microprocessors, switches, circuit boards, server racks. The more advanced the system becomes, the more intolerant it is of inefficiency. Copper can't fully replace silver without performance loss. Aluminum can't touch it. Physics doesn't negotiate. Now add energy transition. Solar panels require silver paste for conductivity. Each panel uses small amounts, but scale is the trap. Millions of panels become tens of millions of ounces. That silver is not recovered. It's locked into infrastructure for decades. Then comes the phase we're entering now. Computational and military demand. Data centers powering artificial intelligence systems require extreme electrical reliability and thermal efficiency. Defense systems require precision, redundancy, and resistance to failure. Both converge on the same material constraints. Both converge on silver. And here's the critical part. Silver demand didn't spike because of speculation. It rose because systems were redesigned around it. Once that happens, substitution stops being realistic. So you can't redesign a power grid or a data center mid-cycle. You can't pause a defense program to wait for a cheaper material. When silver is baked into the architecture, it becomes a structural dependency. This is why silver shortages don't behave like oil shortages. Oil shortages are loud. Prices surge immediately. Politicians respond publicly. Reserves are released. Supply is redirected. Silver shortages are quiet. Inventory drains slowly. Premiums rise before spot prices do. Delivery times stretch. Industrial buyers secure supply long before the public notices. By the time the price reflects reality, the metal is already spoken for. This is exactly what happens during resets. Paper systems adjust first. Physical systems adjust last. But physical constraints ultimately dictate the outcome. And this is where the $96 trillion number matters. When that much paper wealth needs to be stabilized, collateral becomes king. Central banks don't collateralize with ideas. They collateralize with assets that function regardless of trust. Gold has always played that role. But silver now occupies a parallel position, not as a reserve metal, but as a functional necessity for the systems the next economy depends on. That makes silver uniquely dangerous to misprice during a reset. When resets accelerate, the first thing to break isn't markets, it's alignment. Paper markets assume abundance. Physical markets deal with reality. During stable periods, the gap between the two can persist for years without consequence. During resets, that gap becomes impossible to maintain. This is where silver behaves differently from almost every other asset. On paper, silver exists in unlimited quantity. Futures contracts can be created endlessly. Leverage can multiply exposure dozens of times over. Prices can be pushed down without a single ounce changing hands. But resets expose a fatal flaw in that structure. Paper silver only works as long as nobody asks for the metal. Once physical demand tightens, something subtle happens. Delivery premiums rise. Contracts roll instead of settle. Temporary shortages become permanent back orders. These aren't anomalies. They're warning signals. And they always appear before price moves. Historically, silver doesn't rally because investors suddenly wake up. It rallies because industrial users panic first. They don't speculate. They secure supply. And when they do, they remove metal from circulation entirely. This creates a feedback loop. Less available metal leads to higher premiums. Higher premiums expose paper suppression. Paper holders demand delivery. Delivery fails. That's the moment resets turn visible. We saw this pattern in past monetary resets. We saw it in energy crises. We saw it in critical materials during wartime economies. The sequence never changes. What makes the current reset different is scale. The modern financial system has layered claims on top of claims for decades. Derivatives, ETFs, synthetic exposure. The $96 trillion figure represents obligations that assume liquidity will always exist. But liquidity is not the same as supply. When physical constraints assert themselves, leverage collapses into the real world. And when that happens, repricing isn't incremental, it's discontinuous. Silver doesn't move from 20 to 30, it moves from suppressed to scarce. This is why silver often looks broken right before it breaks out. The system keeps the price low to maintain confidence. Because once silver reprices honestly, it sends a signal that something deeper has failed, that physical reality has overruled financial abstraction. Resets try to avoid that signal for as long as possible, but they can't avoid it forever. The moment allocation replaces price discovery, the reset has crossed the point of no return. The reason this reset feels invisible to most people is because it isn't a T happening where they relooking. They're watching stock indices, they're watching inflation prints, they're watching central bank statements. The reset is happening in inventories. Silver inventories are not growing, they're shrinking. Not dramatically, not in a way that triggers headlines, but consistently. And consistency is what matters in a system that relies on just-in-time delivery. Industrial users don't stockpile metal unless they have to. Storage costs money. Capital efficiency matters. When they start securing longer-term supply, it's because they've identified risk upstream. That's what's happening now. Energy infrastructure is expanding faster than raw material supply. Data center construction is accelerating globally. Defense procurement has shifted from peacetime efficiency to resilience. Each of these trends increases baseline silver demand, not speculatively, but structurally. At the same time, mine supply is constrained. Most silver is produced as a byproduct of other metals. That means supply cannot be scaled in response to silver prices alone. Even if silver doubles, it doesn't automatically double production. The system doesn't respond that way. This is the kind of mismatch resets feed on. Paper systems assume flexibility. Physical systems don't have it. And this is why monetary policy is now colliding with material reality. Central banks can inject liquidity. They can manage expectations. They can stabilize asset prices. But they cannot create silver. They cannot accelerate geological timelines. They cannot override physics. That's why silver becomes central during resets. Not because policymakers choose it, but because it exposes the limits of policy. When a system reaches the point where financial tools can no longer solve physical shortages, repricing becomes inevitable. The only variable left is speed. Slow repricing maintains order. Fast repricing signals loss of control. Resets aim for the former. Reality often forces the latter. The $96 trillion reset is already in motion because the system is trying to absorb imbalances without triggering visible failure. Silver sits at the pressure point of that effort, and pressure points always break last and hardest. Every reset ends the same way, not with collapse, but with redefinition. The old system doesn't vanish overnight. It fades into irrelevance as a new framework quietly takes its place. New rules, new priorities, new assets that matter, and old ones that no longer do. This is where silver's role becomes permanent, not cyclical. In the next system, value will not be measured solely by scarcity or tradition. It will be measured by functionality under stress. What works when trust is low? What works when supply chains strain? What works when energy, security, and data cannot fail? Silver qualifies on every front. It conducts power when efficiency matters. It enables technology when performance matters. It underpins defense when reliability matters. That combination is rare. And during resets, rarity isn't defined by price, it's defined by necessity. This is why silver doesn't behave like a normal investment during resets. It doesn't peak early. It doesn't respond cleanly to sentiment. It lags until the system has no choice but to acknowledge it. By the time silver is openly discussed as critical, the repricing has already occurred. The $96 trillion reset will not announce its completion. You'll recognize it only after new norms have been established. After purchasing power has shifted, after allocation has replaced access, after physical assets quietly outrank financial abstractions. This is the final pattern every reset reveals. Those positioned early don't win because they predicted the future. They win because they understood constraints. Silver sits at the center of this reset, not because it's fashionable, but because it's unavoidable. It bridges money and matter in a system that has exhausted its ability to pretend those are separate. The reset has already begun. The repricing is not finished. And history shows that once physical reality takes the lead, it never gives it back. That's the part most people realize too late.